Welcome to Postdoom, regenerative conversations exploring overshoot grief, grounding, and gratitude. I'm Michael Dowd, your host. And in this conversation, recorded in September of 2019, I speak with Raul Ilargi Meijer. Most of us just know him as Ilargi. Ilargi and Nicole Foss have been the force behind the automatic earth. And Ilargi, for many years, still does to this day, writes the Dead Rattle. And he has, an introduction, a link, and then excerpts from 12 to 15 major news articles from that day. And for a period of about 2 years, I checked it every single day, the Dead Rattle. So I wanted to have Ilargi as part of this Postdoom perspective because he gets the big picture, including all the finance stuff that rarely gets reported on. And occasionally he's actually quite prophetic. So I encourage you to check out the Automatic Earth, his stuff as well as Nicole's, and his Dead Rattle. One of my main sources of sort of news aggregate on things related not just to financial, but a number of things related to sustainability on your Dead Rattle on the Automatic Earth. So I'd like to, for people who aren't familiar with you and your work, I'm wondering if you could please at the beginning just share a little bit about, so folks can sort of get who you are and what you bring to the world, what your particular passion or interests are these days.
More and more it's politics, right? The last few years.
Yeah.
And that's not because it's my passion, because when you do a news aggregate, you can't escape that anymore. Yes. But Nicole Foss and I started the Automatic Earth it was January 2008, so 11 and a half years ago, because before we were writing for the Oil Drum, and that was all about energy and only energy, and we wanted to tackle finance as well, because this was before the GFC, the Great Financial Collapse. Is that what they call it, the Australians? It's really an Australian thing, right?
I have no idea. I'm in the United States, so I have no idea what Australia calls it, but it's, yes. The
GFC, I think that's Australia was the first place where I heard that used.
Oh, I see, okay.
It doesn't matter. But this was, we were saying that this whole thing would collapse before it actually collapsed.
Yes.
And so at first it was a lot about finance, but then at the Old Drum, obviously, we were talking a lot about energy. And of course, like everybody starts with the environment, right? And only after that finds out about energy issues and finance issues. Or not everybody, but a lot of people have that same trajectory.
Right, yeah. Well, say a little bit more about your Dead Rattle, because the Dead Rattle every day, or virtually every day, you post, 10 to 20 news articles, an aggregate site where you cut and paste some of the best quotes. You give your own introduction, which is always fun for me to read. Say a little bit more about what you've done over this 11-year time period and how things have shifted at all.
Well, the Dead Rattle, I think, maybe has gotten out of hand a little bit. At a certain point, things really changed a lot from when we started in 2008 to, as time went on. And at a certain point, I thought we need just daily content. And the easiest way to get daily content was to post what I was already reading anyway. Yes, like in the beginning, we started out with Dead Rattles, but they were like really, really long articles where I used to put a lot of my own opinion in and stuff like that. They were not the aggregators that I use now. But yeah, it did get kind of out of hand, I think, because it takes me 5-6 hours a day, and maybe I should use those hours in a more original content sense. Also, in the past few days, I've gotten a few mails from Google AdSense that I'm violating some of their regulations.
Oh, really?
Of course, they don't say which ones. They just give you a library full of regulations, and please pick out which ones you think you're violating. Well, I don't fucking know, do I? How can I know? But this may be content related or, copyright related.
Yeah, yeah.
But I have no way of knowing.
Yeah.
And Facebook threw out the Automatic Earth account 3-4 years ago.
Oh, really?
Never explained why. Never said a word. Well, they didn't exactly throw it out. I have no access to it anymore, but I still get emails from Facebook like, oh, your friend posted this, your friend posted that. I mean, these companies are like the worst things in the world. Like, they have no accountability.
Yes, yes,
exactly. You have to have like 1,000 friends or 1,000,000 friends, and they all have to like knock on the same door, and then they'll answer the door. Get fuck off.
So, okay, so let me ask then, because this conversation series is largely about sort of what I'm calling post-doom, overshoot, conversations around overshoot, grief, gratitude, and grounding is the way we subtitled it. But it's really people who get the big picture, ecologically, environmentally, finance-wise, which you get in spades, energy, because energy undergirds the whole thing. And to some degree, human nature. Now, obviously, most people don't get all of that. One of the things I love about Nate Hagens is the fact that he's one of the few who really bring in also human nature. But
I will certainly do that because Nate and I have the same teacher.
Yes. Oh, okay. Cool. So, Nate, you have the same teacher. In what sense?
Jay Hansen.
Oh, sure. Of course. Yes. Exactly.
Jay is the first person who introduced me to the information that really built my view of the world.
Yes. Yes.
But I'm in touch with Nate sporadically, but
yeah.
when we both come from the same background.
Yeah. Yeah. And anybody watching this or listening to this conversation, you really do yourself a service to check out the posts that are still up online on Die-Off, Jay Hansen's legacy work.
I checked that, and they're not on Die-Off anymore. They moved to jhansen.org.
Oh, okay, good. jhansen.org.
I had never seen that, but I don't regularly check that. It's 20 years ago that I read the whole thing.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. I about 5 years ago, I cut and pasted, I don't know, 20 or 30 articles from there just because I thought they were great, and I didn't, in case the site went down, I wanted to make sure I had them.
Yeah. 20 years ago, I read like 2 or 3 of them, and then I took a month off and read everything.
Yes. Well, okay. So this is good. So actually,
1999. So.
Yeah. Well, this is good. Let me give a sense of your trajectory in coming to what I'm calling a post-doom place, which is beyond freak out, beyond like, oh, fuck. And then like, okay, you wake up each morning inspired to do what you can do. What is it that allows you to do that? What are the tools or whatever? So share a little bit of your story, your sort of trajectory.
First of all, I think maybe you shouldn't project your, how do you call it, journey too much on other people. Like, not everybody went through the same.
Exactly.
Not everybody had the same reactions. Not everybody got grief. Not everybody got, there are differences there.
What language do you use for a contracting or deteriorating future? And is there any emotionally laden language with it at all? Or is it more like collapse?
I don't know. There's a language that I would use. But to get back to what you were saying before. So for me, this first started, I got out of high school, went to university, and thought, this is crazy. These people want me to do the same things that I already did in high school. This was in Holland, where I grew up. They want me to do the exact same things. And these are not the same, the things that I want to do. These are the things that they want to do. I already did 6 years of that. So I quit university, played in a band, worked in a bar, chased skirt, and only years later did I get back to, oh no, we're gonna do something with my brain.
How old are you?
No, I never answered that question.
Oh, okay, that's fine.
Oh, I answered that question by saying yes.
Whatever, it doesn't matter. I don't care.
Fine. So yeah, and when I read all the stuff on Jay Hansen's side in 1999, I thought I couldn't put it into words when I was at university, but now I can. What a shit education system we have. Why do I have to go to a website that a private person from Hawaii has put together? But the most intelligent things that people in recent memory have written, and only the ones that he's read. Why do I have to go to that to get an actual picture, an accurate picture of the world? And university couldn't give me that at all. Yeah. So yeah, that for me was a big wake up moment. Yeah.
And what were you waking up to specifically? How did you see the future differently after die-off? After Jay Hansen's
well, I'd already been reading about environmental issues, because that was not so hard. And then of course, over the past 20 years since I was reading what Jay had accumulated, there's a lot more, and there's more depth and all that kind of thing. The energy issue, peak oil, that entire field, that entire issue, and all the fantastic people that he accumulated on his site, like all the scientists behind the whole peak oil idea. That opened my eyes a lot. Mm-hmm. But the best thing about Jay was the understanding of the human brain, how the human brain works. You know, because he had all these people, and you see it in every field of environment, energy, finance. They, oh, no, we can do this differently. And with what Jay accumulated, I started thinking, no, we can't. You know, yeah, we can in theory, but not in practice, because it's not how our brains work. Our brains work, the amoeba part of the brain is the first to act and react, to turn that around, react and act to anything we experience. And it's not our human brain or frontal vortex, cortex. It's you know, it's the primitive part of the brain that reacts.
Lizard legacy. Yeah.
Yeah, and that's why, as I've often written, we are the most tragic species, because we cannot see ourselves destroy stuff, but we cannot keep ourselves from doing it. Yeah. Any other animal does the same, but is not aware of, you cannot see himself doing it and be aware of it. But,
yeah. I'm curious, how do you see the coming months, years, decades, and if our species has longer than that, how's your sense of that?
I think a lot of it depends on how much of the natural world is going to survive our most rapacious episode. Yeah. You know, if there's not a lot of life left out there, then we won't be left out there either. That's sort of like the whole thing.
Yeah.
But it's that tracks right back to energy. You know, if the whole Homo colossus is Homo oilus, you know, it's Homo carbonus.
Yes, exactly.
That's all there is. You know? And not Homo colus, but Homo oilus. You know, because Homo colus, that's fine. You know, it takes a lot of energy to dig up coal. Oil just comes spurting out of the earth.
Yeah.
It's only extra energy, you know, that you get, and you don't have to do anything for and stuff like that.
Yeah.
Yeah. But and then we do what the amoeba do, what the bacteria in the petri dish do. We accumulate, and you know, there's more and more of us, because this energy has to be used? Does any have this like this underlying secret thought that is very much part of nature? You know, get rid of the imbalance. Get rid of the imbalance. You know? If there's a lot of energy, get rid of it.
So is your sense along the lines of inevitability that any tool-making, symbolic speech-using animal probably would have gone our path eventually of self-destruction?
No, I don't. It's interesting, but it didn't happen in Australia.
Yeah, well, it didn't happen for 97% of human history either. We found ways to constrain ourselves for most of human history. It's really only been with the mining of metals and the...
Yeah, true enough. It's only when we found oil that things went completely wrong. Yeah. Yeah, but you know, I was thinking, you sent a quote from Joanna Macy.
Uh-huh.
Who started off science says...
All right, there's science now to construct the story of the journey we've made on this earth, the story that connects us with all beings. Right now, we need to remember that story, to harvest it and taste it, for we are in a hard time, and it's the knowledge of the bigger story that's going to carry us through.
Yeah, and I thought when I read that, like, how can you start off with science? The Aborigines have been doing this for tens of thousands of years without any fucking language, without any science. You know, they have this oral history that they still know. There's fewer and fewer of them who remember, but nothing to do with science. Not how we define science, at least.
Right. Well, I agree. And because much of my life in the last 15, 18 years has been about working with mostly Western educated, Western oriented folk, how do we bring those kind of folk, is it even possible to bring those kind of folk into the kind of relational world that the indigenous peoples had?
I didn't, the use of the word science, because of what I know about the Aborigines, doesn't really figure. Like, you know, if you're talking about modern, I'm in Athens, Greece, right? In middle of the city, tourist area, blah, blah. The only thing connects people is iPhones. You know, interconnectedness, yeah, sure. You know, I mean, they're talking to people in China and Japan all the time. They're just not talking to themselves, amongst themselves. Right? Well, they'll order a souvlaki and a beer, but then it's back to the phone, like either on like a speakerphone or on some Facebook or Twitter or whatever. This is an interesting phenomenon. You know? Certainly, when you think about how the Aborigines made their culture survive and kept their culture alive.
Yeah. Well, I'm curious, did you ever have an experience of we are so fucked and have that emotionally mean like, oh my God, like did you ever experience sort of the anger or the depression or the grief that many people do when they realize perpetual progress is a myth?
I don't know that it made me angry. It just made me think, oh, no, I understand.
Yeah.
Yeah, well, not terribly emotional. What I get emotional about is seeing the elephants and the giraffes and the lions and tigers disappear.
Yes.
Because I cannot imagine living in a world where there are no more of these animals.
Yes.
That's and you get to think like Monsanto. Like how did we ever come to the idea that we can only grow our own food by killing everything near that food? You know, how where did the idea ever come from?
Yeah.
That's the kind of I can get angry about. Yeah.
Yes. Yeah. I mean, that's my sense of what anthropocentrism does, what human-centeredness. Once we shift from a life-centered or ecocentric worldview to a human-centered where it's all about us and we don't give a flip about any other species but our own, we inevitably put ourselves on the path to self-destruction. We inevitably end up in this kind of a world. That's my sense.
That's why we invented the iPhone. Who needs anything else anymore? Who needs anybody else anymore? I mean, the influence on our lives of these little machines. It'll take 20, 25 years minimum to even understand the first bit of the influence it has on our lives. And there's people like you and me didn't grow up with these things. Imagine growing up with them, never knowing anything else. That's scary, man.
Yeah, I completely agree. And I've read enough of John Michael Greer to have a sense that we are also, as oil, well, and, you know, a lot of the other people that you've already mentioned, but that we will see technological contraction, technological simplification over the coming decades, assuming that climate change doesn't wig out in some kind of massive way that, you know, we find a rather rapid collapse, which I think is possible as well.
No, I think Nicole and I were right from the start. As we've always said, it's going to start with finance. It's not going to start with ecological collapse or energy. It'll be finance.
Well,
and the rest will follow after that.
Yeah, I agree with you, with the only exception that if two or more of the five major bread baskets of the world fail in the same year, we are looking at serious famine, and if three of them fail in the same year, we're looking at, you know, very possibly 1 billion or more people dying within 8 to 10 months. So,
well, we can make a bet on this, but what's the use? Why should we? What's the fun?
Well, since you touched on finance, say more, and this is one of your major fields of expertise. How do you see the finance unraveling? How do you see it collapsing?
Central banks, and central banks are the only reason that we still have an economy that sort of looks okay. And especially the Chinese central bank, because they've printed more money than all the other central banks together. And they did, like by a margin.
Wow.
And yeah, how can you say when this is going to stop? You know, I mean, you get all these culprits, and they're all doing the same thing. It's like the five families in New York, and like, who's going to start shooting first?
Do you have any if onlys? If only this, then this wouldn't have happened, or how do you interpret
let's limit it to the 20th century. It was full of moments like that. I think like come 21st century, we appear past that. But, you know, when we went up the gold standard, or when World War II was finished, yeah, we could have done a lot of stuff. But then, you know, only in hindsight do you read what especially the US was really up to as soon as 1946 and all parts of the world. Of course, the Korean War was already on, and the French were involved in that. Yeah, so it's all about war. It's all about power. And in the end, if you have the oil, then you have the power, because there's no energy source that, especially when it comes to war, even remotely compares to oil.
Yeah. Yeah. Have you read?
Hitler was going to Baku, right? And Hitler wanted to go to Baku because that's where the oil came from. He never made it there, but if he would have made it there with like an oil pipeline or something, the world would have been a different place.
Yeah. Yeah. Well,
Nicole and I would still say that it's finance, the first one to come down, because there wouldn't have been any reason for the financial system as we see today, if not for the resources. Like the financial system was built on top of the resources. That's why it'll come down first.
Yeah, that makes total sense, and that's my sense of things. I'm curious, say a little bit more, because everybody watching or listening to this isn't going to necessarily be familiar with Nicole. So say a little bit about what the two of you have been up to and are currently up to on the Automatic Earth.
Well, as I said before, we started the Automatic Earth 11 and a half years ago. The past like 4 years, we haven't done much together anymore. We lived on a farm that she had with her husband and kids near Ottawa 10 years ago or something. And then I'm not much of a public speaker. Nicole is. Nicole is the kind of person you slip a quarter in the bag and she keeps talking for 3 hours. So we did water tours of like all throughout Europe and Australia, New Zealand. She did a lot of U.S. tours, all about the same developing narratives. But at a certain point, she moved to New Zealand, where she's living now, and lately she's been telling me that I support Donald Trump, which of course I don't. But you cannot explain that again every single day. Like,
Yes.
You know, my problem with the whole Trump situation is not that I support Trump, but that the other side are such a bunch of idiots and fools, and the media in the whole Trump saga is like, the New York Times and Washington Post. I saw them 3 years ago. I saw them making up 10 stories, bad stories about Trump, make them up out of thin air, just to wet the beaks of their that's another Godfather thing, like, wet the beak of the readers, and now all these readers, there's so much residue in their brains about anything Trump that he's a terrible person. He's a terrible person. It's like, yeah, maybe he's a terrible person, but the other side made up the whole Russiagate thing. I mean, America is such a divided society right now, more than it ever has been, perhaps, in history. And if you look what's going on in Britain, the whole Brexit thing, like that's even more weird than what's going on because there are like 500 different ways they can go, and they all pretend that they know exactly which way the country should go.
Jim Kunstler, I interviewed him just about 5 days ago, and you have been two of the people consistently hitting both sides here in America, both the liberals and the conservatives, the Democrats and the Republicans, and I greatly appreciate.
That's not the reaction we get. Like,
I know.
The reaction we get is, oh no, look, you don't attack Trump. Everybody has to attack Trump. It's like, no, everybody is already attacking Trump. Well, and if I start, or Jim, and we've talked about this, Jim and I, if we start attacking Trump as well, then we're in the same camp as the New York Times. But the New York Times is making up stories, 10 stories every single day, just to get copy. It's like, I don't want to be in that camp. But, you know, I guess you have to follow the news the way I do or Jim does to get that distinction.
Right.
And I'm happy that you get that at least. At least when we have one person. Yeah. Oh, I'm sure there's more people.
Oh, I'm sure there is too. I'm sure that, but I'm amazed at how many times from close friends of mine who are otherwise very ecologically oriented, and I'll send a post that Jim has written or something that you've written, and I get the reaction of, well, they just don't get it. He just doesn't get it. He's pro-Trump. And it's like, no, that's not it. You know, at any rate, it's tiring on my side because I appreciate both what you and Jim have done along those lines.
You see what's going on with the Democratic Party now. They're forcing Tulsi Gabbard out. You know, and she has the vote, she has the support, she has the donors, she has the donations, and the DNC just invents criteria for not including polls that she does well in. Mm. It's the same thing that happened to Bernie Sanders. So you think Bernie Sanders is now standing up for Tulsi Gabbard? No, he's not. It's the same stupid party. And that's all you have to go against Trump.
Yeah, I mean, I think that my sense is that the United States, at least for over 120 years, has been in the pockets of big money, and you can't vote against the interests of Exxon. You can't vote, no matter who you elect, you're not going to vote against the interests of pharmaceutical or, you know, big banking. The Democrats and the Republicans, to my mind, are the left and right wing of the American corporate party.
Absolutely, yeah. I mean, the things that are happening in Hong Kong now, my natural instinct is to say, well, let these people free. You know, but what exactly is the difference between Capitol Hill and the Chinese Communist Party?
Yeah, yeah. Yeah, good
Want
point.
to sit down and talk about it for a few days? There won't be much left after it.
Right. Well, Ilargi, one of the questions I'm asking a lot of the people, most of the people in this series, is what is your sense of like what's no longer possible and what still is possible individually or collectively? In other words, what's your sense of where we can make a difference and where we really can't? It's futile.
You may have to remind me of the last bit of that, because the first thing that comes to mind is 20 years ago when I was reading the Hansen stuff, one of the first things that came to my mind was I have to make a mental shift. Like we can no longer plan 20, 30, 40, 50 years ahead, like people do when they start paying into pension plans, because that makes no sense. I mean, planning 40 years ahead makes no sense anymore. Maybe it makes for you if you're 40 years old already, but your grandchildren who are 10 years old, they'll never get a pension anyway. But apart from the financial part, like the ecological part, there's no use planning that far ahead. Right. So it's time frame that was the first thing that I became aware of that really had to change. Mm-hmm. So and the first, the second, third bits of your question was what will not be possible.
Just a sense of what do you see as inevitable, and what do you see as still possible?
Well, what I'm hoping for is that we're going to shoot anybody who shoots an elephant or a lion. That would take out Trump's kids. That would be a good thing. They're completely useless. You know, like, who the fuck can go to Africa? Excuse my language. Who can go to Africa and shoot a lion in 2018 or 2019? Who are these people? How is that possible? So yeah, at a certain point, I hope we'll get to the awareness point where we can think. I know of old Greek stories. I don't know if it's mythology or actual stories, where the punishment for killing a dolphin was death.
Yeah,
and I think it should be in Africa as well.
I completely agree. One of the things that Thomas Berry used to say, he was one of my main mentors in the 80s, 90s, or late 80s, 90s, and until he died in 2009. He said, democracies, or democracy in its current form, is a conspiracy against the living world, because democracies give all rights and privileges to individuals and to corporations at the expense of nature. What we need is a biocracy, where humans are speaking on behalf of the other species, on behalf of the watersheds. And as long as we have human-centered democracies, we're going to continue to destroy the planet. That always made sense to me.
That borders on the tragedy of the commons.
Yeah. Yeah.
Which a lot of people think has been disproven.
Well, no, what it hasn't been disproven.
It exists, at least.
Yeah, I mean, it needs to be, the only way that commons aren't destroyed is when there are small groups of people that are immediately and personally responsible for it. Otherwise, if nobody's responsible, then everybody degrades it. Yeah.
Well, the only thing it takes really is to be aware and use your education systems to keep people aware of you're from there. You know? And that brings us back to where we started, the Aborigines. You know? In their stories, they have no doubt about the value of things in nature, of immobile or living things in nature. They are very aware that this is who they are.
Yeah. And
we've lost that. That's not us. Us is a phone.
Yeah.
Yeah. We have a lot more connection to a thing like this than to a tree or a plant or an animal. Yeah.
Yeah. My hope is that pockets of humanity in places that can be sustainable, or at least that aren't devastated by the ravages of climate and resource depletion and toxic pollution and et cetera, can once again come back into the kind of living arrangement with primary reality, with the biosphere, with the ecosphere that the Aborigines and indigenous peoples have had.
Yeah, and I must admit that I'm completely useless in that, but you made me think of my good friend Dave Holmgren in Australia, who I really cherish, and he may be one of the people who can make that happen.
I agree. I'll be interviewing Peter Brin, who is he was the editor of the Permaculture Activist here in the United States for many, many years. He's a dear friend of mine. He's still one of the leading permaculturists here in the United States. And I'll be actually having a conversation with Dave Holmgren here in about 2 weeks.
Good. Give him my love. Yeah. I love them.
Yes. Yeah. Connie and I do too. Man. Even though we've not met him yet, we feel that love and admiration for the work.
I met him a couple of times. Yeah.
That's great. Well, Ilargi, any last things you want to say in terms of this conversation series? I mean, it doesn't sound like that post-doom sort of is language that has any resonance for you whatsoever. But anything that you'd like to say sort of in bringing this conversation to a close?
Well, as I said, the first thing, and maybe the biggest thing for me after reading the whole die-off library, and it really was a library, because I really took a month off and read for like 8 hours.
Yeah.
Was okay. My time frame, my time expectation, whatever you call it, has to change. It's not about 40 years in the future. It's about next year.
For more information about this project, go to postdoom.com.